Hey everybody, welcome to Sequelitis.
Welcome to Sequelitis,
I'm Matt,
and I'm Manny.
and King Kong ain't got nothing on me.
That's right. Godzilla versus King Kong. Welcome to the MonsterVerse. Who
This
you
is
got?
King Kong, baby. King Kong all day. I don't want
Hey,
no.
give me Godzilla.
You'll take Godzilla?
Can't go wrong with a nuclear fire breathing giant lizard monster.
I as I was watching this movie, I felt like his whole like fire breath maneuver was pretty fucking cheap. It's like
Why is that?
Well, I mean, because you got King Kong, he's based on like a real animal. He's a gorilla, just like gigantic.
Yeah.
And Godzilla, he's a fire breathing, laser shooting. He can breathe underwater. He can breathe above water. I mean, he's this total like it's bullshit. Man. It was not a fair fight. It's not a fair fight. That's all I'm gonna say. So
Yeah.
that's my
No, I
whole
mean that's
review.
that's definitely why I would sit there and say in an actual fight between two giant monsters, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, freaking Godzilla all day long. But that's one of the things they had to do with Kong Skull Island was they had to make him big enough that they could go on and do a movie where he plausibly fights, Godzilla, who's I don't know, 800 feet tall or something.
All right, so how do you want to break this thing down? Is it a good movie, bad movie? Do you want to go first? Do you want to talk about the all the other movies in the series briefly?
No, I think we should talk about these movies and then we can kind of discuss those other movies because I think I'm a lot more familiar with them than you are. Um,
You are.
but I'm interested in hearing your take on it first because I think you liked it better than I did.
Yes, I will go first. Thank you. Yes, I liked it very much. There was a lot of stuff to like about it. First of all, I'm going to declare this movie. Forget who won the fight. This movie won the fight for what's the best movie to come out in like a year and a half time span. This is definitely it. It's not the best movie I've ever seen or anything weird like that, but to see an actual like good movie come out, I mean, I was seriously contemplating after the fourth time I watched it to go to the movie theater and watch it for the fifth time, and
Oh
then
wow.
yeah, and then I came to my senses and I was like, you know what, I'll just click play on the TV again.
You drank heavily, like you emptied the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. Um, First of all, I loved the I loved so much stuff about the movie. There was some stuff I seriously disliked, but it's like the stuff that I loved, I feel like overshadowed it. But what I loved about it, first and foremost, was how they tried to sell you King Kong as like the hero of the piece by kind of connecting you to his like humanity. It's like he's humanoid. He's human-ish, and so in that way, we're kind of connected to King Kong. He was definitely the hero of the piece. That opening bit where he's laying on the side of a mountain, he looks like he passed out drunk, and he wakes up and he's scratching his ass.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, the first time I saw it, I was like, this is stupid. But by the fifth time, I was like, you know what? That's actually genius.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where they deserve some credit is like going back to Kong Skull Island. They not only did they make him bigger so that he would, physically stand a chance in this fight, but they also had him walk more upright, like a human, rather than the way that he's been portrayed in the past, where whenever he didn't obviously look like a man in a gorilla suit. Like he definitely acted more like an ape would. So that's one thing that they did. And then in this movie, they even gave him like a little human friend, a little orphan girl that he apparently had a bond and connection with. And so you're supposed to view this as like everybody's supposed to be on the side of King Kong in this movie. They're like they make him like what they can do with a giant monster ape. They do it to make him sympathetic and get you to root for him. And whenever you see that he's hurt and injured or in danger, you're supposed to have that sense of like, oh no. And that's one of the things this movie did really well was conveying expression through these CGI characters, these giant CGI characters, and managing to scale that or bridge that scale and size between human characters who we're supposed to care about, I didn't, and these giant CGI characters, and understand that there is a connection between them.
Yeah, so stuff I loved about the movie. I loved the little girl in the movie. I thought her acting was fantastic. I felt like her whole vibe about she was a Kiwi or whatever, a Hiwi or a Yiwi or whatever she was, and like the way that she dressed, the way that she was deaf and she did sign language, like it was inspired. It was like the one truly inspired element of the whole movie, and something that a movie that we just reviewed, Justice League, didn't have a single like inspired element. And King Kong didn't have a ton of great inspired ideas, but that was definitely one of them. That was something that carries the movie through the first like 45, 50 minutes of the movie. Like just seeing that relationship, seeing that little girl, her acting was so excellent. Her face is so emotive. I don't know, that was perfect. Then what else I like about the movie? I liked. I generally speaking, I liked how they kind of got to the character that's going to bring you to Hollow Earth. That Alexander Skarsgård character. I liked how they kind of got you in and out of what his whole deal was pretty quickly without really dwelling on the fact that Hollow Earth is kind of it's been done before, first of all, and second of all, it's kind of akin to like flat Earth, so they kind of played it like, I've got this crazy theory, about this Hollow Earth, which is a really, really, really stupid idea. It's not.
Well, you're going to run into that in a movie
Yeah.
where you're supposed to take seriously giant monsters fighting each other in the middle of, rather than like going to a pretty like remote area with lots of room to move around.
Mhm.
They always seek out giant populated cities with tons of skyscrapers to knock over. So yeah, the Hollow Earth thing. I don't remember if the concept was introduced before Godzilla King of the Monsters, but it was introduced there.
Way
Like
way
it
before.
wasn't as much of a plot element as it was in this movie, but definitely they were just like, oh yeah, no, this explains why, these giant monsters can go off our radar and then reappear somewhere else without us knowing that they're there. And I don't know if it's something that is like a trope in kaiju movies, because I never really got into the whole Toho series as an adult. I watched a lot of the Godzilla films as a kid, but I can barely remember anything about them, and I have not watched them in decades. And then I watched. Did you ever watch the Pacific Rim movies?
No, Pacific Rim Job.
Yeah. Um,
No.
I watched the first one. The second one just looked incredibly stupid, so I didn't even bother. But in that, there's a very similar kind of element where the kaiju's are appearing from another dimension, going through this portal that's somewhere deep within the ocean. So with that, I mean, you could very easily like just adjust the script and make that a Hollow Earth that they're coming out of.
Yeah.
So like the whole Hollow Earth concept, yeah, it was stupid to me, but I was like, I'm watching fucking giant monsters fight each other. Like, it's fine.
Well, they introduced it way back in 2005 with Journey to the Center of the Earth. That was a.
But that's not part of the MonsterVerse.
Oh, isn't it? It's not. Oh, okay.
No,
Yeah.
that isn't.
Yeah.
MonsterVerse started 2014 with the Gareth Edwards Godzilla.
Oh yeah.
But
Okay. I thought
but
they
yeah,
were all
for
together.
me, like I did not give a shit about the human characters in this. And for the most part, I just had a hard time like paying attention to whatever their little plots were supposed to be. By far the worst part of the movie, if you could completely cut it out of the movie and it would not change it, is to take out uh Millie Bobby Brown and I wish I could remember his name, but Paperboy from Atlanta. Um, like that, and the fat little kid from Deadpool 2 and Hunt for the Wilder People. Like you could cut them out entirely. That was a bunch of like nonsense. and it feels almost like they needed a reason to bring Millie Bobby Brown back in this movie because she was in Godzilla King of the Monsters. And they also wanted to pad out the runtime a little bit more. And I'm just like, if you're not going to like write some good dialogue or make something compelling for these characters, like why even bother? Because you know why we're here. You know what we want to see. Like just give us the action. It's like trying to write. It's like trying to write good scenes for porn movies. It's like why bother? Just get the characters from clothes to getting at it. That's all you need.
Yeah, there was parts of the movie that had that kind of vibe to it, and I definitely felt like the whole plot line with the conspiracy theory podcast guy, as inspired as the deaf girl was, that was just as uninspired. It's like it was like a perfect balance.
Yeah, and he and the little kid from Hunt for the kid, like his name, it's not coming to me right now.
No.
um like they gave them just like some trash, like joke, like they're supposed to be the comic relief characters, and I get why you'd want to have comic relief characters in a movie like this, but like that all fell flat for me. That stuff did not work, and it just really, like in a movie like this, it just feels like, okay, this is getting in the way of me seeing what I want to see. Like when you rewatched it, did you fast forward through any of those parts, or did you every single time watch it beginning to end?
No, most of the time I only watched it until the point where the movie stops kind of being great after the whole like boat battle. In my opinion, like that's the that's the best fight in the whole movie when King Kong is on that big ship in the middle of the ocean and he's fighting
Yeah.
Godzilla in the ocean. Like that's the best fight sequence, and everything is worser and worse after that. That part I watched 5 times up to that part, and then all the way
Yeah,
to
and
the ending twice. I think.
that sequence was by far the best in the movie, and that was when I was the most interested in the movie, because with that you really got a sense of like, okay, if Godzilla comes through and like knocks out all of these ships, King Kong's dead. Like he can't swim. He's out in the middle of the ocean. Like he's totally screwed. And that's when you had the most sense of like Kong was in danger up until the final fight in the movie. But yeah, that sequence was really good, and it also just made the human characters seem like, okay, not only are we helpless, but we really don't have any sort of like contingency plan for like what if shit goes wrong, and it did. It was cool to see stuff like that, and like Godzilla just absolutely wrecking shit.
Yeah, and also the first time that I watched the movie, I was really confused about like what Monarch is and what
Yeah,
Apex is, and so in my mind, just in order for me to keep enjoying the movie, I just sort of switched it over to like this is like the U.S. military, like this is some kind of U.S. military operation. They're on a big boat, they've got planes, they got depth charges, they got naval officers. This must be some kind of U.S. Army thing, and it made sense when it was the Army. But then when I realized like no, this is a private company that's like funding all this, I was like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you can be rich, but you can't be like U.S. military rich. Like that's just impossible. No one
yeah,
person can be that rich.
yeah. Like my understanding, like having seen some of the other movies, is that like they're sort of like Shield, but for giant monsters. Like if the Avengers were nothing but like giant Hulks that were 800 feet tall and completely unstoppable.
Yeah, and I felt like the movie didn't get in its own way of me enjoying it too much, except for the plot line with the podcast guy. Like it really like actively kept me from enjoying the movie because of just how poorly conceived that whole concept was. It was
Yeah.
part Alex Jones, part Jurassic Park, and it just was a bad mix of those two
Yeah,
elements.
it had like some tinge of like QAnon stuff to it, and
Yeah.
like I don't know if the casting choice was based on like, well, we can't have a white guy doing this because then like people are just going to think of him too much as being an Alex Jones type character, so that's why they cast a black man in that role. I don't know if that was the thinking behind it, but it sucks because like that actor, I really enjoy watching him as Paperboy on Atlanta. and every time I see him pop up in a movie, it seems like he's just kind of like they're not really giving him anything except to play himself. And in this, it was like slightly different, but like it was just bad writing. So it's just like, well, what is this actor really supposed to do with that? Um, what about so? What did you think about the Elon Musk type character with his own uh, Mecha Godzilla that I guess he apparently like had built in secret?
Well, this is when I have to admit that I am a little bit of a fan of some of the like Godzilla versus movies, like from the '60s. I used to have this one called Godzilla versus Megalon, which I would watch a lot. And in that one, even though it was supposed to be about Megalon, there was like two other monsters. It was like a foursome that they kind of got into. And I don't think Mecha Godzilla was in that one, but I remember seeing the Mecha Godzilla one also when I was a little kid. And when I saw the Mecha Godzilla, I was like, dude, that's fucking awesome. I love that, and I loved it where one character was like, "It's Robo Godzilla," and then the little New Zealand kid was like, "No, it's Mecha Godzilla."
Yeah,
I was like, yeah, it is Mecha Godzilla. That
that was
rules.
like I'm just one of those people that like fan service stuff like that like always gets an eye roll out of me.
I loved it.
Um, but you know, I'm not the target demographic of this movie. Like I'm not. They're not trying to make this movie for me. They're making it not necessarily for you, but like people that are just into this kind of shit and like don't get bothered by the bad dialogue and the goofy stuff with the human characters. You know, other things I'll praise on this movie, kind of compared to the previous entries, is that they didn't do the thing of like having the monsters only show up like when it's raining and it's dark or it's snowing. Like they made it like easy to actually see the monsters fighting. And the other thing that they really did is they would focus on the monsters fighting, and there wasn't a whole lot of like cutting away from that action to like show the human characters doing completely pointless action on the ground. If you watch King of the Monsters, like they have some really cool creature designs in that, but it at times is very obscured by all the weather shit that they put in front of them. It's always dark whenever you see them. And then they would cut away like during the middle, like you have the big fight between Godzilla and Ghidorah, and they cut away from that to focus on human characters on the ground. And it's just like, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm only watching this to see these monsters fight each other. Like, don't cut away to show like um the guy from early edition looking for the little girl from Stranger Things. Like I don't give a shit. Like if one of the monsters stepped on both of them like right as they hugged, I wouldn't care. I mean I would care because I'd be like, good, now they're out of the movie, now I don't have to focus on them anymore.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty grotesque, like sequelitis. Like I could tell what they were going for with that, and I do think that the setup of saying that, there's a Mecha Godzilla that's being created, and that is drawing Godzilla to come out and fight Mecha Godzilla, and then the way that they got King Kong wrapped up in it was, it was a little sideways, but it worked because that whole plot line was much more inspired, just generally speaking. And so that, I mean, King Kong saved this movie. Let me rephrase my whole take on this. King Kong saved this movie. Without King Kong, all you would have had is Godzilla, Mecha Godzilla, conspiracy theory guy, and Stranger Things chick, and that would have been unfucking watchable. But King Kong saved this movie.
Yeah.
But so anyway, but what they were doing was like bringing King Kong to Hollow Earth. That whole plot line was like totally solid, even though it had some major issues. Like it flowed well because of all the good actors that were in it. I loved Rebecca Hall in it. Loved the little girl actress. I liked how Alexander Skarsgård played his character. I liked how he started him off with like a depression beard, and then he quickly transitioned him into like, okay, I'm clean cut again, and now I'm able bodied, and I'm like I'm a meaningful, helpful person. Yeah, even though to me, like, let's say you've got a guy who wrote a book about a place that he's never been to, why is he the one that's like qualified to drag everyone there on a ship? That doesn't make any sense. But
Yeah.
It would make more sense to say like, oh, he's kind of a ride along, or he's going to be there to, give his input on this or on that. But instead, they had that girl. They had this like hot chick girl that was supposed to be the daughter of the Apex. No, Apex. What was the name of that company? It was Apex something. I want to say Apex Aviation, but that's not right. But Apex
I mean, I
something.
could look it up, but I don't give a shit enough of a shit about it to look it up right now.
I don't know. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's driving me crazy. It was like Apex Robotics or something like that. But she was
Yeah.
there as kind of a ride along, and then she ended up, spoiler, she ended up getting killed in the movie. Should people be watching this that have not seen the movie? I don't
Oh,
know.
I assume anybody that's going to be listening to this or watching us, they've seen the movie. Like if
Okay.
you're going to sit here and watch a review of a movie you haven't watched yet, and you're intending to watch it, and you don't like assume that there's going to be spoilers, that's honestly on you. Like at this point, like
Yeah, it's the whole concept of reviewing is kind of weird to me because it's like, do you watch a review in order to figure out if you want to see something or not? Because for me, as a movie fan, I already know if I want to see it or if I don't want to see it before any review comes out. And as a person who buys a lot of movies, I also know if I'm going to buy it or if I'm not going to buy it before I even see it. Usually,
yeah.
sometimes there's a surprise.
I mean, for me, like, I didn't go to the theaters and watch any of the other MonsterVerse movies, and the only reason I watched this one, like when it got released, was because I already have HBO Max. And like for me, I like the idea of having theatrical releases released on streaming services, day and day, because that saves me a trip to the theaters. And I realize like a movie like this, or something like Justice League Snyder Cut, there's probably like an enhancement to watching that in movie theaters. I said this. We didn't do a review on Tenet, but I believe I said this to you when we had a conversation about it. That I actually went to a drive-in movie theater to watch that, and I felt like it was a better experience watching it that way than just watching it at home on my television. But you know, for the most part, there's only like these big like action movies that I feel like would benefit from that. And I do feel like, if you had gone and watched this in the theater, you probably would have enjoyed it more, just because of the way that they can enhance the experience for you. But for me, like I I I wasn't going to watch this unless I got it on Blu-ray like months later, or it came out on streaming or something. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, it's not my thing because it very well could be my thing. Because have you ever heard of a film called Shin Godzilla?
No.
So Shin Godzilla was Toho, the Japanese studio. It was their return to the Godzilla franchise. And I watched that on a plane, and I wish I had been able to watch it in a theater, but I really enjoyed that movie. And it's because of the way that it's the human characters are, the focus of the film, and Godzilla is an event that's happening to them. And it's the way that all of the action kind of carries on, because it's almost an absurdist kind of movie, because what's happening is you're having this giant monster show up and start destroying parts of Tokyo and putting people's lives in danger, and then you're showing this whole chain of command going through the Japanese government in trying to like respond, like determine how they're going to respond to the situation. And like the pacing of that, and just the way everything happened, even though I'm watching it with subtitles, like that didn't dampen my enjoyment of the movie at all. And I was way more engaged with that movie than I've been engaged with any of the MonsterVerse movies. And it's because with that, like there was compelling reasons to give a shit about what was happening to the human characters. Whereas with these movies, you have that a little bit in Godzilla 2014, but for the most part, like the only movie that was trying to embrace the absurdity of giant monsters was Kong Skull Island. And even with that movie, there were definitely some moments to where like it just like it wasn't silly in the way that I would want it to be silly. Like you have like some glamour shots of like, Brie Larson up on a cliffside and stuff like that. And I'm just like, look, like I don't know why they bother with these like, name actors. I mean, I do know why. And it's because they formulate like, oh, well, if we throw in, like with Godzilla 2014, if we have Bryan Cranston in it, he's somebody that's coming hot off of Breaking Bad. People are going to come out to see the movie. And then he's barely in the movie. They kill him off, before all of the action really starts. And so, they keep throwing in these actors, and it's just like, look, like you don't need Stranger Things girl because she's hot off of Stranger Things. Like, just get actors who are good for this and put them in ridiculous situations, but focus the action on the monsters, focus the action on the destruction, the spectacle of all that. That's honest. People are there to see.
Yeah, it's actually hilarious how they cast these things based on like whatever is popular at the time. I was thinking the
Oh yeah.
same thing about Bryan Cranston, and I didn't realize that Millie Bobby Brown was in the last Godzilla movie too. Maybe she's in both the other Godzilla movies.
Yeah, they really pimped her out in the same way that they really pimped out Bryan Cranston. The difference being this time was that she actually was involved with the plot, and she was in the middle of the action at the end of the movie. Whereas like Bryan Cranston, like basically was like, yeah, I'll come and do your movie, but I'm only going to be on set for 3 days, and then I'm going to find something better to do, and I don't want to be on screen with giant monsters. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's smart, but you probably shouldn't have done this movie. They probably shouldn't have cast you in this movie and just had an actor that you follow throughout, like somebody who's like, you know, I don't even want to try and rewrite the movies.
Well,
But
I actually,
but yeah, like what
I
would you
do want to
think?
rewrite.
What would you think if like if it was a bit more kind of absurd with like the human characters? Because this whole thing of like trying to make it more like, the Michael Bay Transformers and the Avengers, where it's just like, there's a grounded realism of like having these militant organizations involved, in working with or studying, following, these creatures, as opposed to just having government organizations like you had in Godzilla 2014 that are like, yeah, no, these things are fucking destroying our cities and killing millions of people. We have to figure out a way to stop them.
Well, I definitely think first and foremost that it should have been a government thing and not a private organizational thing for sure. Whoever was building the Mecha Godzilla, but I think that there was some huge missteps in the plot, and the fact that they were trying to kind of combine these two really bizarre ideas together. Like first of all, I don't think you really get this just watching the movie one time, but when you see it a couple times, the absurdity of this, what I'm going to tell you next, kind of really becomes very crystal clear. Is that the whole beginning part of the movie, the first hour or so, is all about this impossible trek for King Kong to make it all the way somehow to Hollow Earth. You know, he fights through all these different things, and it's trial after trial, and it's so hard, and they barely survive. They need special equipment. It's so hard. How do they do it? And then, as soon as they get there, Godzilla just blows a giant hole in Hong Kong, and then he just looks down this hole and he's like, oh! You know, he just blows
Yeah,
this
that
giant
was
hole. He's like, and then King Kong just looks up, and King Kong's like, oh, and then it's like, how'd you get here? You know, it's like, it should have been both of them trying to get to Hollow Earth, but not like that. You know,
yeah.
that was a huge misstep in the plot. That was some studio exec was like, why don't you just have Godzilla blow a giant hole in the earth and then you're there. I mean, what about all the ocean and the lava and all the stuff between the top of the earth and the center of the earth? Like, what about all that stuff? No, it's just blast a giant hole. You know, just look
Well,
down a
see,
giant hole.
you're thinking of Earth on the scale of the Earth we live in, which is about this big, and Earth on the scale of that movie, which is like maybe this big. Like
Yeah,
it's just a little pea. Like that's why the monsters are so big. Like everything else is miniature, and the monsters are just kind of more normal sized. It's just they're so much bigger than everything else.
yeah.
But yeah, that like I remember like watching that and almost kind of like having my jaw drop because like I was like, are they? Is he about to blast a hole all the way to the Hollow Earth? And
Yeah.
sure enough, that's exactly what he did. And not only does his blast go all the way down there, but like his like roars and stuff, like they can hear it all the way down there. It's just
Yeah.
like, all right, man. And it's honestly like I think doing more ridiculous shit like that, like getting rid of like the other stuff and just focusing more on just having ridiculous shit in this ridiculous world where giant monsters exist and just tear shit up. Like give us more of stuff like that. Like as ridiculous and stupid as it is, it's like embrace the stupidity. Like I'm not watching this movie because I feel like it's going to teach me about, the human experience. I'm watching this movie because it's just basically like a really glossy version of a kid in a bathtub with action figures going pew, pew, pew.
I completely disagree because that there's moments like that not want to say ruin the movie because the movie's still pretty good, but it's like you don't need to have something ridiculous like that happen. You can have it to where they're both on a journey to Hollow Earth and they're gonna meet there and they're gonna have their big fight there at Hollow Earth and just set that up to where they're both on an adventure to Hollow Earth. It's like it was like Godzilla had his own movie, and then King Kong, it's like his side movie, just sort of like joined forces with Godzilla's like main movie, and the whole climax that I don't know. There was some stuff at Hollow Earth and at the climax that really lost me and really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And
Get into it.
I'll tell you what it was. King Kong gets to Hollow Earth first of all, and he's like, they're all trying to tell him like, oh, your family's gonna be down there. You're gonna love it. Forget Skull Island. Welcome to Hollow Earth. Your family's gonna be there. It's gonna be great. He goes there. His family's not there. There's a bunch of monsters there. And then, he rips one of the monsters' head off and drinks his blood. I was like, all right. I can see why you would do that. Hold on, I'm having technical difficulty here. Give me 1 second here.
All right.
Coming back online. In 3, 2, 1. I don't know what's wrong over here. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm back up. Okay, so so he drinks this monster's blood or whatever. I thought that was pretty cool. But then when King Kong goes to like his king castle, first of all they ape that moment from Avengers where Thor gets his like new badass axe, and they just have King Kong just like find an axe, like no explanation of like how this thing was created or who made it or what it is, and then they were like, oh yeah, you just put it in the ground and it charges like a cell phone. I was like, well, that's really stupid. And then the fact that you just kind of like they acted like it was a puzzle. Like, how's this dumb monkey ever gonna figure out that this axe fits right into this hole? That's this axe-shaped hole. It's like who made all this stuff? Who built this? This dumbass monkey is not gonna build a big castle. I mean, you saw the bed that he made for himself on the side of that mountain. He just fell asleep right on the side. He just passed out. And he wakes up, scratches his ass. He's not building anything. This guy. And the other big misstep that they made was with the technique that Kong is using versus the technique of fighting that Godzilla is using. They try to sell you this idea that King Kong like bows to no one and that he's like, he kind of hulks out more or less. It's like he just gets angrier and angrier and stronger. But what they should have done was had him rely on his superior intellect, because he's like a primate and this other thing is a lizard. And like, lizards famously have brains that are like about this big, and King Kong has a brain that's like this big, Use that superior intellect to outsmart Godzilla, get him in some kind of trap, maybe use your whole like sign language thing that you spent so much time setting up in the climax. And that was the only thing where they kind of I was baffled by how there wasn't like a trap where he's like, okay, now spring the trap. I don't know how they missed that, but
yeah, Well, and it's just because again, like it's a movie that is just it's all built around a predetermined conclusion. It's Godzilla and King Kong are going to fight, and neither one is going to kill the other because we need them to come back in sequels. They're going to end up having to fight another common enemy, and that's going to unite them. And then, like, moving forward with the franchise, like, we can have them team up to battle other monsters, which I have zero interest in. But I've got 2 points I want to make,
Go
and
ahead.
one point is the whole journeying to Hollow Earth. That almost seems like a pointless kind of subplot for this, because it seems like journeying to Hollow Earth would be setting up a battle between Kong and Godzilla down there. That doesn't happen. And they, like, the whole thing about blasting his way down to center Earth but then not going down there, just doing it just to get Kong's attention. Like, that's literally the writer of the movie being like, oh my god, I'm 160 pages in and I've only got like 20 more to go. How do I get Kong from center Earth, which is taken up, that journey's taken up most of the story to this point, to where Godzilla is in Hong Kong, so we can have this cool looking neon fight battle. And oh, I know, he'll just use his breath to blast down there. And so, like, it's just kind of a cheap little shortcut. And I feel like it really robbed the audience of the opportunity to see them come together in that unique environment. We've got we've got two movies out of the four showing giant monsters tearing up human cities. Like, we don't need to see that whole thing again. Like, there's so many fucking movies where you can see a scene exactly like that happen. So give us something that we haven't seen before. You've got this whole thing where gravity's weird, like the ceiling and the floor, you can jump from one to the other, and it's like, that would be an awesome environment to show these two fighting in. And then you can get them to a stalemate and throw in Mecha Godzilla, and then there, go back up to the surface, whatever you want to do. But yeah, that was a big wasted opportunity where this could have been a better, like, more memorable movie. For the other thing about it is,
Totally agree.
I really got the sense that this movie was sort of ripping off the plot of Batman v Superman.
Also,
Specifically, like, Batman and Superman fight, and they get to a point to where one is in a position to kill the other, but because of a sort of understanding that kind of happens between the two of them, the other decides to back off and let the vulnerable one live. Then later, the two of them have to team up to fight against another force that they would not be able to defeat on their own. So in the way that Batman and Superman are fighting, and then there's why did you say that name? Like, there's this you have Godzilla roaring at Kong, and Kong roaring right back, and for whatever reason that convinces Godzilla to be like, nah, we cool, I ain't gonna kill you, man. And so he backs off, and then the two of them have to come together and fight against Mecha Godzilla. And then, just like the same way that they had to use the kryptonite spear, Kong's little magic battle axe, that's what they needed to defeat Mecha Godzilla.
yeah, and I think another thing that they clearly missed was that I think you needed some kind of plot line where the bad guy, that the Spanish Apex Elon Musk guy, I think he should have possibly kidnapped that little girl and like used her to run the Mecha Godzilla, something like that. That gets Kong like involved. And, I feel like they created that great character, they created that great bond, and maybe they've just done it too many times in the King Kong movies where King Kong is trying to save, like, the beautiful girl or the young girl or whatever. And maybe they felt like if we do that yet again, it's going to be old hat. And maybe they're right, but it just seemed like a missed opportunity. Like, you had set that character up, you had set that bond up, and it really didn't. It didn't roll into the climax of the movie.
Yeah.
So I think that was definitely a misstep.
Well, you also had another repeat of a plot line, so I don't understand why they didn't use the little girl in that way. But the whole thing of the human characters have to figure out a way to revive, this monster that is on the brink of death. Like, that's a repeat from Godzilla King of the Monsters, where they accidentally almost kill Godzilla, and they're like, "Oh, we gotta blow up a nuclear bomb in order to revive him." And they do something very similar with this, where they're like, "Oh, we got to create this giant electrical charge to restart Kong's heart."
Yeah, it's like none of us are doctors or know anything about this, but let's blow this chip up on his chest and see if that helps.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but like, you got Kong, who is intelligent enough to have some like sign language skills to be able to communicate that way, but somehow he understands that if he does the lethal weapon, shoulder popping trick, he can get his dislocated shoulder back into the joints. Like, how the fuck does Godzilla know this?
Yeah, I also felt
It
like
was absurd.
I felt like the fight that they had in the city, like that was the worst of the fights, and it could have been the best, and that was definitely a missed opportunity. I felt like the way that he wielded his axe was so kind of strange because it's like he was using it as a shield, but at the same time, it's like he was charging at Godzilla, but it's like Godzilla is choosing to shoot right at that axe, which
Yes.
it's like even as
Like I saw that and I was like, can he not aim? Like,
yeah,
it seems like in other movies he's got pretty decent aim, and like other monsters have to duck out of the way. But
yeah,
this, he's like intentionally like shooting the axe, and it's like, I
yeah,
mean, I guess he's not smart enough to know that like he's fucking himself up by doing that.
yeah. But at the same time, Kong wasn't like repositioning the axe as he was like jumping and moving. It's more like Godzilla was changing the aim of his laser as King Kong was jumping and moving. And like,
Yeah.
and that it just didn't quite track correctly. There was a couple times where they did that.
It's one of those annoying things of this shot is in the movie specifically so it can be in the trailer, you know?
Yeah, and they
And
do a bad edit too, where they show it from one angle and then they cut to a different angle, and you can tell that everything is totally different because like at one part, King Kong is holding the axe like closer to his face, and the other part he's holding it like way over his head. And it's like because if you tried to connect those two movements together from one shot to the next, it wouldn't have tracked.
yeah,
And there was
there was
another
something.
moment early on when he throws that tree, and it's like they've got the trajectory of how they want the tree to fly, and they just sort of make it happen, but it doesn't feel like he would have thrown it at that angle or he's I don't believe that he's a spear chucking like Olympian level athlete. I don't know. I don't buy that. You
Yeah.
know?
Oh, I think with that, like we can throw that more kind of like in nitpick territory. Like,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
it's a nitpick.
like if you're already like buying into the movie at that point, like you're not going to think about that as much as we have. One of the things that was suggested by somebody else, I don't remember if it was like on Double Toasted or what, but they're talking about one of the ways that they operate the Mecha Godzilla, and this kind of didn't make sense for me. But none of this shit makes sense really. Is that they have to use one of the skulls from the Monster Zero in order to pilot it, almost like very similar to what they do in Pacific Rim with the two pilot jockeys in that. Um, and somehow that turns evil, kills the guy who was controlling it, and then turns Mecha Godzilla bad. But somebody else had suggested that what they should have done is they should have actually had the head preserved, like still living inside of this big giant jar, and then that's how the whole thing of it like turning evil. Um, but just that whole sequence, I'm like, this is something so bizarre and like confusing that it almost seems like, why didn't somebody try and come up with a better idea than what they have here? Like,
Yeah, and also that character, I forget his name, but the conspiracy theory podcast guy. It's like he would switch randomly from saying like really crazy, insane things, like I'm gonna bathe myself in bleach, to all of a sudden he would be like, oh yeah, this is a supercomputer, it's a living supercomputer that does this and does that, and he knows all about all this stuff. And and then sometimes he would kind of come off as like a janitor or something, and then at other times he'd be like, oh, actually I'm an engineer, I'm a sub engineer. It's like
Yeah.
I just have trouble buying that someone who has an engineering job is making a good living, is working at a place like Apex, decides to like lock himself in this crazy bunker and do this crazy podcast, and then his whole theory
Well,
that
I think the thing was more either he became a conspiracy theorist because he was working for Apex, or he was a conspiracy theorist who got a job at Apex as a cover in order to dive deeper into the organization. And I might be giving the movie a lot of credit with that explanation. I just didn't give a shit enough about the character to really get into, like, the second he like started doing his conspiracy. I'm just such a trope, like, hard to take a movie seriously that has a character like this.
yeah, and then another huge plot hole that really struck me when I watched it multiple times was that his whole like crazy theory is that the reason Godzilla came up to this specific city and attacked this very specific place is because they have a giant mechanical Godzilla in there, and that didn't seem like a crazy theory as much as it seemed like the obvious truth. And then when they asked Apex, like, "What's going on in that facility?" And it's like, "Well, we're gonna take care of Godzilla once and for all. Don't worry about that. We have a plan." It's
Yeah.
like, what could your plan possibly be? You know, other than build a giant metal Godzilla. Like, I could tell you that you're doing that. You don't have to tell me. I'll tell you. So this the idea that that it was some sort of crazy conspiracy theory. Like, I found that to be a little bit obnoxious. Like, it's
Yeah.
obvious that that is what is happening. I think that you should go to Monarch and be like, hey, this Godzilla guy didn't give us any grief for the past 5 years. Now he comes here, he specifically attacks your facility. What's going on there? I think that's obvious. So I think you could have even had Monarch investigating Apex in like a more straightforward way, and that could have been like your gateway to having like a better plot. Because you don't need to make it like a conspiracy theory. I'm breaking in. I'm doing something shady. You could just go look. You could be a government agency
Yeah.
with the clearance to go look. You could be legitimately curious. Why did this giant monster come and attack your facility? Let's have a look. How many sublevels did you say you have here? And go down to sublevel 33, check it out. You know, that just would have made more sense to me. I felt
Yeah, but
like,
then how do you squeeze in two kids to go along with them, at that point?
and usually I love kids in movies, and I did love the little girl, but those two kids. I mean, I want to like that New Zealand actor. And I even I just don't. But I was watching the movie and I imagined a funnier thing happening than what really happened. There's one scene where he's trying to like guess the password to get in or whatever, and I always hate scenes like that. But I thought it would have been funny if he was like, "Try the password Koala 3. I'm in." And then some other password comes up, and he's like, "Okay, this time I'll try Koala 4. It worked. I'm all the way in. I'm inside. I'm in the Mecha Godzilla." That would have been funnier to me than what happened. It's
Yeah.
his whole character was utterly pointless, and like whatever relationship he was supposed to have with Millie Bobby Brown was utterly unclear, and whatever like plot arc or character arc that the conspiracy theory guy was supposed to have was very unclear to me. I think they tried the hardest with him because they set up that he had a ex-wife that was dead, and he carries around a bottle of whiskey, which is a really, really, really wise thing to do.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, and it didn't look like a gun though. That was the part I didn't understand why that kid kept saying that. Guns have this thing called a handle. Every gun I've ever seen has a handle, and this thing didn't have a handle. It was
What?
in a case, but it didn't look like a gun.
Keep going for a minute. I'll be right back.
All right, hold on. Let me switch to my A camera here. All right, yeah. So I loved the little girl in the movie. I want to expound on that a little bit more. I felt like that was the heart and soul of this movie, and I love it when a movie has like a great opening, a great middle, and this movie really does that. All the way up to the part where King Kong is fighting in the ocean. there was some of that stuff that did bother me a little bit, especially upon rewatching it. Like the fact that King Kong needs so much help from this military installation. You know, he needs depth charges. He needs them to shoot rockets at Godzilla. You know, I mean, what did they think was going to happen when they're dragging King Kong across the ocean, and you've got this giant lizard that lives in the ocean? I mean, what did they think was going to happen? That's what I'm curious about. You know, and then later on they revealed like, oh yeah, I guess we could just fly him in a giant net. You didn't think of that before, like just fly him in a giant net as your A plan. You know, but I loved the setup for that fight. You know, King Kong's on a giant boat and he's fighting this lizard that's popping up. Like that's a great, you know, that's a great setup for a fight. So, you know, I felt like they definitely had their ducks in a row with that fight. But like Manny said, I agree that they should have done one fight in the ocean, they should have done one fight in the Hollow Earth, and should have done one fight in the city. And each one should have been, you know, well staged. You know, three well staged fights. You know, as well staged as the ocean battle was, it was crazy how poorly staged the final fight was in the city. You know, I want to see more point of view of like the people on the ground like looking up at the giant monster. Like I love that kind of vibe. And I did try to go back and rewatch the Godzilla King of the Monsters movie. I didn't get very far into it, but I saw that they did have more scenes like that. And
They did, but they did this really annoying thing where they would do a snap zoom, and they did it like I want to say at least 3 times, and it totally destroys the realism because if you're trying to get the human scale, like looking up at this giant monster exploding out of a volcano, like show it from like the way a person sitting on the ground looking at it would see that happen. Don't do the snap zoom because then that just that ruins, at least for me, the immersion of it.
yeah, so what's your like final say on this? You know, let's wrap this up. What did you think about King Kong versus Godzilla?
I would say for me, like, it wasn't a movie that I was going to be inclined to enjoy, but if you already like the other MonsterVerse movies, you're going to enjoy this. They managed to get right a lot of things that the other movies do wrong. And if you're not annoyed by the human characters, like you're going to be into this. It'll be a fun ride for you. And if you can safely do so, like go see it in the theaters, unless you got a really kick-ass home setup.
Okay, I felt like this is a good movie. It's worth seeing. I feel like you don't have to be into those other kinds of movies. You don't have to enjoy seeing monsters and that kind of stuff fighting. I feel like they're well staged fights for the most part. You know, the plot moves along at such an interesting clip at sometimes that they do a really good job, especially in the whole Hollow Earth plot, of just sort of like dodging a lot of the big obvious questions that you would have and just kind of being like, oh, we're gonna go over here, oh, we're gonna do this, and just kind of like just jumping some hoops, just kind of make you forget like, wait, what is our plan? Wait, we're gonna go to Hollow Earth, like. Like the guy who builds a ship that can go to Hollow Earth. Like, what does he need the other guy for? Like, he's found Hollow Earth. He's built the ship. It's like, oh, he needs to figure out that there's a certain passageway that's only in Antarctica. It's like, well, Godzilla found another passageway. Godzilla.
I mean, like he needs the guy because the plot calls for it. That's all the explanation that you need.
And when I saw that, I was just looking at it and I was just like,
"You were serious about that?"
Like that's that's your real like.
Let me ask you this question. Since you're not a person who is already a big fan of these movies, mm-hmm. like you didn't watch the other 3 before this one, right?
Mm-mm.
What was it that made you want to watch this? Just because it was there, or like were you genuinely looking forward to it?
Good question. So the way it happened for me personally was I had no idea that this movie was coming out. I had not heard of it. I didn't know it was coming out. I didn't even know it was a thing. And then I was checking my YouTube, and I noticed that I subscribe to a lot of different movie review podcasts, and I noticed that 3 different podcasts had put it up on the same day, like day and date that it had came out. and I was like, "Oh my god! I think that means that this is on HBO Max." And I turned on HBO Max, and there it was.
There it is.
And I was like, "I can watch this. Like, I can watch a new movie." And I just was excited to see a new movie. You know, the Justice League didn't do it for me because that's like an old movie. You know, it's like a
Yeah.
re-release. It's like this is not a new movie. I was excited to see Wonder Woman. You know, I thought the trailer for that was good, and I checked that out day and date. And so this one, I checked it out. I mean, I was home. You know, I've got HBO Max. I'm all set up. You know, I can. I mean, it's cool to be able to just check out a brand new movie. That's really cool. You know, speaking of new stuff, I don't want to segue or anything, but like I tried watching that Winter Soldier TV show, and I found that to be totally uninspired and horrible. And I could only get through about 20 minutes of the first episode, and I was like, this is not for me. You know, maybe once it's all out, and maybe I'll check it out again. But you know, King Kong, I clicked on it. You know, I'm always down to watch the opening 10 or 20 minutes of any movie. I'm not above that, and I just loved it. I was gripped by it. You know, I imagine you watching it. You know, you're probably on your phone or something. You're not paying any attention. You know, the little girl is deaf, so everything she and you know, my girlfriend was the same way. She was watching the movie for like 30 minutes, and she was like, "Why doesn't that little girl ever talk?" I was like, "Because you're not looking at the movie. You're not
No,
watching
no.
the movie."
To my credit, like I actually was paying attention in the first scene where she shows up, and like right away, I was just like, okay, she's deaf, and she did a thing that like I don't know, like I don't really know and interact with that many deaf people, but she kind of did a thing where she was just like, and to me that struck me as not something that a deaf person would do. You know, it was like the little kid, like, come on, kind of face. Um, so like at that point, I was just kind of like, oh God. But I'm one of those like I'm a fucking misanthrope, and you know I get real annoyed with kids. So like when I'm watching a movie and they got you know little kids running around and stuff, I'm just like, oh God, I don't want to. Like, there's very few movies that feature kids heavily in main roles that I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm on board with this.
Well, let me just tell you that you are so dumb because that little girl is deaf, and so all that stuff she's doing is what deaf little girls would do. So,
Is the actual actress deaf?
yes, she is.
Okay, well, you know, I was hesitant to say anything, but like that was just the impression that I had from it, and you know, that's what we're here to do: talk about our impressions of stuff.
Yeah,
And sometimes we're fucking wrong.
that's right. All right, you guys. This has been Sequelitis. Thank you so much for checking it out. We appreciate
Yeah.
you, and we'll see you guys next time. Da da dun da da dun da 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 dun.
Boom, 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 boom.
Bum.